don't change the wheel, change the tire. How we're going to influence the industry most is if we get simple solutions. And I think, unfortunately, in every country where a passive house has been introduced, it starts out as an elitist industry. So it's for the higher end, and it is more expensive, and it's, unachievable for the greater market. What I'm pushing really hard on at the moment is to see if we can get a compromise between both. So we're going to have a 10 to 15 year period where the code is neither passive house nor the CRAP that we're used to. It'll be a passive solar design somewhere in between, where we educate the entire country, let alone the industry. We're on this huge journey of education at the moment and knowledge sharing. So the way I see that is, and we're building one home right now that's not passive house. It's a passive solar design. It's a pilot project for us, and there's a full aircon system and everything in it. And we're going to monitor that house and see how it performs. But there's definitely a place for that in the industry. And if we come with the knowledge that we've had in passive house, or that we have in passive house, and we then apply those principles in the best possible scenarios that we can to just a high performance timber frame home, then we can only win. We can only get better.
Well, Brian, I'm really excited to have you here on Undercover Architects podcast. I am an avid listener to the Sustainable Builders Yak, and I've heard your voice for a very long time, but never actually got to see you.
Likewise, I'll return the compliment. I'm privileged to be here.
So, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know a bit more about you. I think as the interviewer on a podcast, and Sustainable Builders Yak sort of always started out as kind of more of an interview process rather than you both, you're talking personally. So a lot gets obviously, we were just chatting before we sort of jumped on about how great the most recent episode at this time of recording is in terms of the conversation between some of the other founding members, to actually hear sort of their backgrounds and their personal approaches to this. And so, so I'm really looking forward to learning a bit more about you and your business and how you approach construction and your general sort of values around your business and the way you do things. So I'm wondering, before we dive in, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and also about how ISMART, your business, actually began.
Well, firstly, I'm a father of four. I'm a husband to one, the rock that is Sabrina, my wife. I'm a carpenter by trade. I have 12 siblings, 7 brothers, 5 sisters. Grew up in country Ireland. Yeah. Grew up in country Ireland. I'm a country bumpkin. Like I said, chippy by trade, served under my dad and my uncle, and then just progressed did my carpentry apprenticeship, then went to New York for 6.5, 7 years. Did a bit of project management and stuff over there. And then, GFC hit, ended up back in Ireland with not much, and said, right, well, where's the next country to go to? And it was Australia, because I had a brother-in-law out here at the time. And this is 13, 14 years later, here we are.
And
absolutely
so when did you actually start ISMART then in that process?
So I originally didn't start ISMART. My parent company is Emerald Building Solutions, after my home country, and that was started in 2014. I joined with ISMART in 2015-ish, and then took over ISMART in 2017 and made it part of Emerald Building Solutions. So the building company, or the registration, it's my registration. I am a registered practitioner, and it's under Emerald Building Solutions, and ISMART's trading name.
Gotcha. Okay. And just as a sidebar, those 12, being one of 12, are many of them still back in Ireland, or have they also sort of, traveled afield?
All bar one. There is my older sister. One of my older sisters is in New Jersey now. She lives in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Right. So the rest are all still at home.
Yeah, the rest are all around, within the earshot of home, within 10 or 20 k's of home ish. Yeah.
Gosh. Christmases as a get together must be insane.
Yeah, we are literally, as I sit here, I am 13 days from getting on a plane to go back. We haven't been back for 6 years, so it's going to be a big one.
Oh, wow, that'll be amazing. So I can't imagine feeding all of you when you were growing up. My 16-year-old son eats for 5 people. So,
yeah, it was a bit tough.
12 would have been insane.
Clothes and food were a bit of a struggle, all right? But yeah, you learn to fight your corner.
Yeah. Now, you're obviously not from Australia, and as you've just described, and you still obviously got a very strong accent, which is awesome. And you also have that international experience. I'm wondering how that's potentially changed or inspired or driven the approach that you have to building, especially in the West Australian context, because Western Australia, even though it's, we're all one country, it is quite different to how a lot of other parts of Australia operate. And I know too, when I started learning more about, I went from being an architect that practiced in one location to then obviously learning a lot more about Australia generally, and then also overseas construction and design practices as I've been growing undercover architect. And I was working with some West Australian clients and learning about just the design and the construction methodology there's quite different to what we do elsewhere in Australia in terms of the materials and the soil conditions and even the climate to a certain extent. And then also the industry there, I think, is a lot more heavily driven by the volume builder part of the market. So the percentage of homes built by volume builders is significantly higher there than in lots of other parts of Australia. So I'm curious sort of how you've seen that with your international knowledge and your experience coming into that context, then what you're sort of, doing in terms of how you're working with clients, your focus and how you've sort of shaped your business in that environment with that international perspective.
Loaded question. So we'll just go back to the start. We'll go back to the start. Look, it wasn't hard coming to Western Australia specifically because I hadn't experienced the Eastern States at all at that stage. So coming to Western Australia, when I got here, I just thought, oh my God, this is Neolithic. It is literally the Wild West. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, that's just where it was at the time. And the National Construction Code allowed it to be like that. Like, it was the bare minimum, you know what I mean? Yeah, just barely passing legal and let's get it done. So that was okay. But what I did see was I saw a very, very small niche group of people like trying to push a little bit of sustainability and trying to get into that market. And like, let's call a spade here. I saw a real viable business opportunity to push into the sustainability market. But pushing in, if we were going to do it, it's like anything I do in my life. It's got to be top dog. It's got to be perfect. So obviously you just seek out Passive House and you go from there. I will say my discovery of Passive House comes from Daniel Kress. So Daniel Kress worked with ISMART when he came to Australia first. He gave me a lot of knowledge. He passed on a lot of knowledge to me while he was here before he moved to Sydney. So that was really my, my building block or my foundation for Passive House and how I got started. From there was a couple of panel systems. So we had our own manufacturing plant at the time, and the panel systems were quite difficult and cumbersome, and they didn't work with my full philosophy of where I wanted to go. So as soon as I took over iSmart, I just, down to the drawing board, right? How do we make this work? How do we make this economical? And we'll touch on this a bit later. But essentially what I wanted to do was have a product that we could push out to mass market, high volume, high performance that can be pushed out to mass market with minimum impact or, minimize the risk, if that makes any sense. So that was kind of where my focus was. So I was always focused heavily on, Passive House, but more importantly, mass market entry is where I was at. I pushed really hard, and then eventually it just got so difficult financially. You can't run a manufacturing plant building 6 to 8 houses a year. It's not possible. You need to have other income streams. So one thing had to happen. We had to grow or we had to get smaller, and we got smaller essentially. So in getting smaller, we automatically then got pushed into the, niche within a niche boutique market, and we ended up doing very high-end Passive House stuff. And that's kind of where we're at today. And we've become, I don't like using this term, but it's been coined to me all the time. We've become industry leaders or industry authorities in Western Australia for Passive House. Not by choice, but that it's just an organic growth, I guess. And now there's a lot of architects coming to us, and in particular larger firms coming to us for consultation with, even commercial projects and stuff, trying to get detailing and trying to implement Passive House principles into, projects more cost effectively. So that's kind of where the company's at right now, and that's kind of where we're moving. We've got a lot of architectural stuff that we're building, but we've also got a lot going on left field with consultation and membrane sales and all that kind of stuff as well.
That's fantastic. And I think, I can see why you would be considered an industry leader, because you're so heavily focused on sharing your knowledge. So the only way that you can actually sort of step into a position of leadership is if you're willing to actually demonstrate what you know and be willing to share it. And I think that something that is fantastic about the sustainable community generally in the industry is that they are willing to collaborate and share and pass on this knowledge because it's part of a bigger vision to ensure that this is the way that the industry moves.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of phrase, oh, it's probably 4 or 5 podcasts ago, I'm not sure, from a kernel where it says if you walk past it, you accept it. Essentially, in short.
Yes, the standard you
Yeah,
accept. Yeah, the standard you walk
yeah.
past is the standard you accept. Yeah.
Yeah, so I use that phrase quite a bit, and I also use the phrase. I use this a lot in my presentations. Is if we think of the industry as a whole, and we think of the systems that we use, well, we already have a wheel. Let's use the same wheel, but change the tire, right? So Australian standards, we have it for all types of construction. It's very, very good. There's nothing wrong with it, but we do need to upgrade to sustainability measures and high performance measures. So essentially, take the Australian standards we have now, update them with high performance insulation, high performance windows, etc. And then we have a new high performance system based on the old standards. Our little bit of a stumbling block at the moment is that the National Construction Code is, it's missing the link there. In my opinion, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But there is a link. There's definitely a missing link there. But that was always my driving force, was to have a system that, any carpenter can come to build a house. If it's Australian standard 1684, it's timber frame house, they can build a high performance house the very same as they can build a house to code. There's not many things that change. There's a few details in there that change to do it right, but risk mitigation is key here. And the risk mitigation is once you push to passive house or even high performance timber frame, if you start to insulate a building and put in proper windows, then your moisture passage through the building changes. We're not going to get into that here, but this is where I feel the risk mitigation is very, very important. And that's why I give those presentations and I give out free information, because people need to know that. That's very important.
Yeah, I love that. We are going to dive into a little bit of more about, sort of the National Construction Code as we go on. But I first wanted to chat about Builders Declare, because obviously your business signed up as a signatory to Builders Declare Australia when it first started up. And you're one of the founding members of Builders Declare. You co-host Sustainable Builders Yak. You're in the process of starting the Sustainable Builders Alliance. I know that Live Life Builders come on as a platinum sponsor for the Sustainable Builders Alliance, which we're really excited about. And really, it's all about helping support builders and industry in general. And I think then that has an on-flow effect, obviously, in the accessibility of the information that homeowners can also benefit. I know I've put lots of homeowners onto the Sustainable Builders Yak in this education about sustainable building. So can you talk to me a bit about your involvement in this, why it's important to you, why you signed on? Because I imagine it's a fair amount of commitment of your time as well. You guys run this as, all of you run this just as a kind of passion project, in terms of what you do on top of your everyday business. Why is this, I suppose, is a bigger question. Why is this the way that you've chosen to do building in terms of sustainability being important to you? And then also why you've kind of signed into the commitment that you've made to Builders Declare and the work that you do there, and now Sustainable Builders Alliance.
In short terms, it fits. It's as simple as that. It's correct, it's right, and it fits. If we're going to be serious about making a difference, then don't talk about it, act on it. And it's the same with the other 6 directors that are in this group. When I actually happened on this group, I wasn't one of the original guys. I fell in after a couple of weeks. So the boys did their first webinar, and I fell in on that webinar. And in that webinar, they said, "Oh, if anyone wants to get in touch and help out," and I was straight on the email. I was like, "Right, this fits what I do. This is me, my karma, filling my cup. I want to give back." Right. So yes, it has benefits, and I'd be a fool to say it doesn't. It has PR benefits for me personally and my company to be involved in something like this. That is always a plus, and I can't ignore that. But the reality is that if we're going to be serious about something like this, then the guys that have the knowledge need to share the knowledge. And as far as I was concerned, I had quite a bit of knowledge at the time, and there's absolutely no reason why I can't share it. And this is just another platform for me to get that knowledge out there.
That's fantastic. And so at the time of recording, where is Sustainable Builders Alliance at in terms of it being a resource that builders will be able to tap into?
So, by the way, thank you for your sponsorship. Absolutely fantastic. We only released 10 of the platinum sponsorships, and they were literally gone in a week. We were absolutely overwhelmed with it. But to answer your question, at the moment, I'm away for the month of August. So the boys have very kindly pushed it to September. So there's a date in September. It'll be released. I'm pretty sure we're releasing on the webinar next Wednesday. But I think it's around the 3rd week. There's a launch event in Melbourne. Hopefully I'll get over to that. But I think the website will probably be released a week or two before that. So early to mid-September is when the website will be released. And yeah, again, I have to put out huge thank you to Jeremy. He is the heavy lifter. And this website is absolutely fantastic. I know we say that, and you guys are all like, oh, yeah, we know it is. Nah, wait till you see this thing. There's
Yeah.
so much information in there. And we've only gone, passive solar design, high performance. We haven't even delved into passive house on the website yet. We haven't even gone there. There's no detailing, or that all has to be we have to do all of that yet. So there's a
Yeah.
lot more information to come. But very, very exciting to see it.
Oh, it is. And I think if Jeremy, of course, runs the social media, the Instagram account
Yeah,
for Builders Declare, and he's constantly sharing very detailed, very generous, incredible information on that just for a social media platform. So if the website's, I can imagine it'll be that on steroids, and it'll just be actually an
absolutely.
incredible
Yeah.
resource.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's incredible. He is such a heavy lifter, and he's got so much knowledge. And if anything, I've said it in my own podcast, it's not released yet, but it'll be released in a couple of weeks. I personally, myself and Hamish, we are, one-eyed passive house monsters, if you want to call it that. My thinking has come way back. And because of, I had a vision and an understanding of passive solar design, etc. And then I had my box where I was in passive house and a rabbit hole. And since then, I've leveled off a lot. Like the conversations that we have with Jeremy and Hamish and the other guys, there's always some really, really good conversations in there, and your level of thinking changes. It really does. It's fantastic to have these guys involved.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So I think that's the challenge, isn't it? When we, just as a side note, there's this sort of sector of the industry really passionate about sustainability, and what often that transposes out in or translates out into how it looks like externally is passive house versus passive solar, and people
Mm,
having to make some kind of like it's a divided kind of choice, and it's like, well, and so then I think as a homeowner kind of looking in, it's understandable that you can kind of feel confronted by that, feel like it's too big a choice to make, that it's kind of, and it's weird, sort of this, it looks like infighting, but it's not. It's actually really passionate people sharing
yeah.
knowledge about things that they really care about and getting to the nuts and bolts of what's going to make building better. But for a homeowner looking in, they feel like they've got to choose one or the other, and they're going to be less or better if they don't, if they, whichever side of the fence they fall on. And so I really love that there's this collaboration. I think Jeremy, is, and I see the same thing for Jennifer Edwards with Lighthouse Architecture and Science. She's very passionate
Yeah.
about passive
Yeah,
solar and what it can
absolutely. Yeah.
do. And, and I think that this is this fantastic conversation that can keep happening in the industry. And because I think people are leaving their egos behind, and really coming together, all it's going to do is continue to elevate the experience and the standard of construction, which then benefits homeowners, benefits the environment, benefits the built environment. There's such a fantastic ripple effect that's going to happen.
Yeah, I see. I did a bit of research when I was starting out first, and when I said earlier that I came back to, like, don't change the wheel, change the tire. How we're going to influence the industry most is if we get simple solutions. And I think, unfortunately, in every country where a passive house has been introduced, it starts out as an elitist industry. So it's for the higher end, and it is more expensive, and it's, unachievable for the greater market. What I'm pushing really hard on at the moment is to see if we can get a compromise between both. So we're going to have a 10 to 15 year period where the code is neither passive house nor, the CRAP that we're used to. It'll be a passive solar design somewhere in between, where we educate the entire country, let alone the industry. We're on this huge journey of education at the moment and knowledge sharing. So the way I see that is, and we're building one home right now that's not passive house. It's a passive solar design. It's a pilot project for us, and there's a full aircon system and everything in it. And we're going to monitor that house and see how it performs. But there's definitely a place for that in the industry. And if we come with the knowledge that we've had in passive house, or that we have in passive house, and we then apply those principles in the best possible scenarios that we can to just a high performance timber frame home, then, we can only win. We can only get better.
Yeah, I love that, Brian. It's fantastic. Now, You're obviously across the changes in the National Construction Code 2022. You've been sharing information about them on the podcast for some time. Sustainable Builders Yak has actually been really awesome in how proactive you've been about educating your audience about the upcoming changes. Western Australia, of course, isn't adopting them in the same timeframes as other states, and it's varying generally. But I'd love to know if you think that the changes are going to generally improve sustainability and the performance of homes. Do you think that we're moving in the right direction? In what ways, and what things do you think are still lacking or might be problematic for people that they need to be aware of?
Big question. I'll shorten it if I can. Look, I definitely think we're heading in the right direction. I think personally that the ABCB need to talk to the right people. So they need to get, building scientists, etc., involved. So the code is definitely heading in the right direction. Absolutely. We now see all 5 passive house principles, and let's not even call them passive house principles. Let's just call them sustainability and energy efficiency principles, because that's what they are. We're looking for healthy living environments that are low cost to run with low embodied carbon, if at all possible. That's the target. So if the code is looking to do that, they're on the right track. I just see a bit of risk mitigation in here somewhere along the way. So moisture management is where my head's at, and moisture management is where I think the code is lacking at the moment. So we've got waterproofing in the code, and we've got moisture management in the code, and they're not talking to each other. And like most people in the industry that have anything to do with moisture management or membranes or weather resistant barriers or anything, they're across this, and we know that it's a bit, once they start talking to each other, the 2022 is better, because we see climate zone 4 or 5 now with the same parameters as 6, 7, and 8. But I think we need to do more. There's a little bit more that need to be done with membranes, etc. I'm not going to get into that, but I definitely think, as you've asked the question, are we heading in the right direction? Yes, we are. Are we going to get there quick enough? Probably not, but we have to accept that this is a huge boat and it's going to take a long time to turn it. And there's a lot of resistance from all ends of the spectrum, specifically the project build industry. But as you said in your podcast, and it was a fantastic podcast you did with the 10 pieces of advice for building with a project builder, that was very, very well done. So
Thanks.
those 10 items are exactly what you should be watching out for. But then you went and you did another one where it had 3 or 4, was it?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Yeah, that was really important, because that one delves into orientation and the right questions to ask these guys, that, if you're looking for performance, that's where you should be. So I think with respect to National Construction Code, they're going to be upset, but they're going to come. They have to come. They'll be kicking and screaming, and we'll drag them through, but they will come. I think what it'll be for most of those larger guys, it'll be a risk mitigation strategy. How do we ensure that we can build the bare code minimum, but not end up with buildings that are rotting? How do we manage the moisture management? And I think that section of the code, if we get standard industry practice correct from the start, then we won't end up with leaky building syndrome like Canada and like New Zealand, which, if we're going to be honest, there is so much information on the internet right now. There is so much knowledge out there. Yeah, you would be foolish to ignore it. So where New Zealand and Canada got caught, they didn't have the information, they didn't have the knowledge, and they just had a code that they just built to. We have that knowledge, and we have so much information available to us now. As a builder, your risk is your biggest problem, and you need to look after it. So I think, like, I can see most of the mid-tier project builders, so where they do, your entry level, but they've usually got 2 or 3 tiers in the company. They've already adopted, weather resistant barriers in the Perth metro area. So we know that these guys are preparing. So that's really reassuring for me when I see that. Now,
That's
their detailing,
fantastic.
yeah, their detailing leaves a lot to be desired, but baby steps. But they are getting there. I can see change, and it's good.
What I find is really fascinating is that I think that the general kind of tone in the industry has been, all these changes are going to cost, a heck of a lot more. And that's been the large pushback from, and the industry bodies have been I think the industry bodies have spent time pushing back rather than bringing everybody up to speed and educating people. So there's sort of now this lag of how we're going to adopt it. But I know, I live about 25 minutes from Byron Bay. We go walking along the beach a lot. There's a house going up under construction at Watergoes, which must be, the site's, I hate to think what the site's worth. I hate to think what the builder's worth. It's got blue Bunnings wrap on it. And you're just like, that's happening at that caliber of project. So for me, it's not a budget thing. It's just that people haven't known the right questions to ask, or the builder hasn't been educated about it. The builder hasn't understood their risk that they're exposing themselves to.
Mm.
And what I get excited about is that all of the information and the noise that's been made about the National Construction Code and these changes has at least put it on the radar of homeowners who are invested and seeking to inform themselves, to start scratching the surface of what they're being told. And I mean, in Undercover Architect, we're all about helping people know the right questions to ask. And what I find is that when they at least have this on their radar, when they can then see a builder shifting in their seat or a designer shifting in their seat going, well, you know, and that's a good red flag for them to go, well, maybe, is this the right person to work with, or does this person need more training, or what do I need to know? So I think that for me, there's just been I don't remember there being this much noise about any other change to the National Construction Code in the past.
It affects the industry as a whole. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that house you were talking about, like, this would come down to, it's a very simple thing. Where is it? What's the climate zone it's in?
Well, it's northern New South Wales, so I think it's climate zone. I'm trying to think what it is. I'm blanking. Yeah, I can't think.
It doesn't matter. But
yeah.
if it's 6, 7, and 8, then it's non-compliant.
Yeah.
If it's got a foil wrap. So is the builder responsible? Yeah, he is, because he's put it on. But if it was in the specification sheet, he should have questioned it. So there's that whole other side of the thing. So as a Proclima distributor, like, we have target audience that we advertise to, and most of those target audiences are, you know, there are specifiers, architects, facade engineers, the kind of guys that are at the top, but the kind of guys that take the risk. So if they're specifying a product and it's not fit for purpose, well, where's the risk? So if the builder puts it on, is he at fault, or is the guy that specified it at fault? So these are the conversations that need to start happening, like, big time. And as soon as that knowledge gets out there, the market will just flip. It'll just automatically flip, because they know if there's risk there, it's not worth $300 or the $400. Whatever the difference is in a weather resistant barrier from a class 4 to a class 2, for $400, you're absolutely going to flip. Absolutely. Because the risk is too high.
I think that's a really great way of putting it. So now, can we dive into some of the things that you do specifically in your projects to meet and exceed the codes? Because I know that for you, you know the changes that are happening in the National Construction Code, but it's like, well, you're building well beyond that already anyway. So I think that it'd be really great to go through how some of these things might apply to people's in their project, where this might be relevant to the National Construction Code changes. So Perth obviously has quite a different climate. I remember I was watching videos of yours in preparation for chatting to you, and you're talking about the fact that, you know, it doesn't obviously cool down at night sometimes, that the home needs to happen. So in terms of some of the things that you do to ensure, I'll just go through them, because I imagine that they get sort of talked about holistically, and that they'll start to overlap. So there's suitability to Perth's climate and how this might vary from other areas, how you think about air tightness and building for air tightness, thermal bridging, which of course is something that's in the National Construction Code and something that we need to think about, condensation management. And then I wanted to also talk about your involvement of modeling and consultants and things like that, and then also prefab elements, because I know that that's something that you do with the way that you put your walls together. So yeah, if we could want to dive into that, and I can remind you of anything along the way, because I know I've just fired a lot of information at you.
That's all right. So the first 3 are very simple: drainage planes, ventilated cavities, and service cavities. That's the answer for those first 3 questions. So how do you deal with the climate? Well, you find out what climate zone you're in first. Perth in general it has 5 climate zones, but I think there's 55 microclimates, 55 or 57 microclimates in here. They get a little bit different as you go towards the coast and you head north. Then from Bunbury southwards, it's about climate zone 6, all the way down to Denmark. You know, you get up to climate zone 7 just as you go down. I think it's Tasmania is climate zone 7, is it, or 8? But we've built all through. Yeah, so we've built 5 homes in Denmark, Pemberton, Bridgetown, all through the Southwest Great Southern, and now we're in Witchcliffe, Margaret River. We've got 2 certified passive houses down there in conjunction with a local builder. But it's the same principle. So when we go from climate zone 4, probably even 3 down to 8, the same principle of wall construction applies essentially, right? So you have your wall cavity, whatever your insulation you pick or choose for that climate zone is irrelevant to this conversation, but that's your insulation. Then external to that, you have a class 4 weather resistant barrier. External to that, you have your 35 mil cavity batten. You can go down to 20 mil, but it's a financial decision. What kind of cladding have you got on? Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Do you need to counter batten, etc.? But what you need is a ventilated cavity. So you got to make sure that you ventilate right up the side of the building, and you get that stack effect, or you get convection going up behind the cladding, whether it's heat or whatever it is, and you ventilate that out the top, or you ventilate up underneath the roof sheets and you ventilate it out the ridge. And your roof plane is essentially the same structure as your wall plane. The insulation will be different. So you got more insulation because you got more heat gain from the sun. So we go, if it's an enclosed roof system, it's an R5. If it's an open roof system or a ventilated cavity upstairs in the attic space, it's an R6. And that's through Passive House modeling. We found that those are the two where you can get, you know, Passive House Plus. We've built, so 2 of the 4 we've done certified or Passive House Plus. So that essentially is your modeling. And then you run WUFI. So years ago we ran WUFI on 3 or 4 different scenarios. So our original panels, too hard, too much thermal bridging, didn't work. But when you come back to Australian standard 1684 and you model that with your insulation, with your ventilated cavity, and then internally your service cavity, it works. So again, don't change the wheel. We've just changed the tire. We've upgraded a standard timber frame to a high performance timber frame. So now we've got safe moisture passage through, we've got a ventilated cavity in the external, and on the internal, we've got a service cavity which allows us to run all of our services. Electrical, plumbing, heat recovery, ventilation, all those services run inside the internal airtight layer. Climate zone specific, we choose to have our airtight layer on the internal of the insulation envelope.
Okay.
So
you, and then are you doing a cavity between the internal, because have you got insulation in the timber frame?
Service cavity. So WRB on the outside, weather resistant barrier on the outside, timber frame, we usually use a 120 so we can get an R3 in there and glass wool bats because that's cost effective, mold and mildew resistant, and it's 100% recyclable. Then on the inside of the timber frame, we have a Perclima Intello, which is a vapor permeable airtight layer. That airtight layer then goes on the inside of that and all the way across the underside of the trusses with an R6 above it. So now we have an external weather resistant barrier. We have our timber frame or our structure with insulation in it. That's our insulation layer. Then internal to that, we have an airtight layer. And that airtight layer then creates an envelope. That's our airtight envelope internally with our insulation layer hard up against it running around. For climate zones 4 through 8, that's fine. That's good. When we get up north, it changes. Our airtight layer has to be on the outside because of moisture management. So it's a humid climate, hot humid climate, and we have our moisture transfer is different. But we're only talking about, say, 4 through 8 at the moment. That's our structure. The internal cavity, you can use whatever you want. Our particular system, we've gone with 70 by 35 timber battens vertically for the gyprock. That gives us plenty of room for all our wires, pipes, everything that runs. And then on the ceilings, we use a BG05 Rondo clip and furring channel system, which gives us a 78 mil cavity, which allows us to run all of our heat recovery ventilation piping through the ceiling systems without penetrating the airtight layer.
And that Rondo clip system you run underneath the trusses, do you?
Yeah.
And then fix the ceiling
That
to
just
that?
clips to the bottom of the trusses, and those Rondo clips are adjustable, so you can get adjustable heights to get flat ceilings.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
okay.
The minimum amount of penetrations you can get through your airtight layer gets you better results. So we've got one we're building in West Leaderville at the moment. It's not a certified passive house, and our result came back on first test at 0.31.
Wow.
So the system just works, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. And yeah, it just works. It's a good system. If you're a homeowner that you're going to build and you are worried, write it into the contract. Get an independent inspector, but don't just go get Joe Blow like this. Get somebody that knows, get somebody that's educated, and get them to do inspections. So you're going to have 5 to 6 hold points along the project that are, you know, critical to the success or critical to the code alignment. Just build those into the contract. Essentially, it's just a guy visiting the site. A builder knows that inspector has got no impact on them whatsoever because they don't have a contract with him. You've pointed this out in your podcast previously, Amelia, but it does give the client either peace of mind or awareness that something's wrong, and then they can act on that. So as a builder, I've never said to anybody, no, you can't have anyone on site. I have bi-weekly meetings with every single client that I build for. They should be on site. They should know what's going on. It's as simple as that. And if the builders want to keep you at arm's length, then build into the contract that you can have independent inspections, 5 hold points at, you know, critical points in the project, and that should solve the problem.